Hi, I'm San Diego family law attorney Brian A. Victor, and welcome to my 13th podcast episode. As I mentioned in my last podcast, listenership has increased with each subsequent podcast I have recorded. As a reminder, if you are not a current subscriber to my podcast, please make sure to go to the iTunes store and subscribe because you don't want to miss any important podcasts regarding child custody and divorce issues. You can also go to my YouTube page to listen to any prior episodes you may have missed or to re-listen to podcast episodes focusing on a particular topic of interest to you. For this particular podcast episode, I am going to discuss the topic of turning a mistake into a learning experience as it relates to a family law matter. Now, there are a lot of mistakes that get made both in the courtroom and when preparing for family law matters. The important thing is not letting the mistake haunt you for the entire rest of your matter. In other words, how do you turn what could be potentially a bad mistake into a learning experience that you can then use in family law cases? It was the philosopher John Dewey who stated mistakes are learning experiences. What this means is if you make a mistake and you then learn from it, you will not repeat the mistake and you will grow to be a better person. The opposite is true, of course, if you make a mistake and don't learn from it. Then, of course, you're most likely going to make the same mistake over and over again. My goal of this podcast is not to be philosophical, of course, but rather point out that a one-time mistake can be a good learning experience, especially in a family law situation. Now, let's say, for instance, you're having a phone conversation with your ex-spouse, and they start making negative comments towards you. I tell my clients not to engage them in this behavior, but rather make note of the situation and focus on the co-parenting aspects. Unfortunately, this advice is not always heeded, and regrettable comments are sometimes made. Unfortunately, these are situations that often get repeated in court declarations. The best advice I give my clients at that point is to learn from the mistake they made by engaging that other parent and refuse to fall into this trap again in the future. Therefore, they turn this mistake into a learning experience which will benefit them and their children in the future. Another situation I see often in family law is a parent who is driven while intoxicated and then minimizes this action by saying it was a one-time occurrence and no harm came to their children as a result. While this may have been a one-time occurrence, the other parent will likely latch onto it and use it to their advantage going through the court process and therefore attempt to obtain custody of their children. An important thing to remember is that any action taken during a family law matter can be used again in the courtroom to benefit the other side. While it may not be something my client wants to hear, I tell them to accept responsibility for their actions, even if their children were not harmed as a result of this behavior. I believe it is best to admit their mistakes, indicate how they are never going to make that mistake again, obtain treatment if necessary so that when there is a court hearing, they will have positives to inform the judge of rather than the negative behavior. This runs concurrent to a recent court decision in a juvenile dependency matter, in re MR, where the court found that a mother who drove intoxicated minimized the seriousness of her behavior and failed to take significant steps that would lead to reduce the risk to the children. While not directly related to family law cases, this finding is still significant and is something I inform my clients of. It is extremely important to learn from a mistake, especially while a family law matter is ongoing, so that it does not significantly and negatively affect your case or your children. To inquire further about your family law matter, look for a local family law attorney who can discuss this process as it relates to your specific situation. In San Diego, contact the law offices of Brian A. Victor for more information on your specific family law situation. Thank you very much for listening to this 13th podcast episode, as well as my previous episodes. And feel free to contact me at my website, www.brianvictorlaw.com, for any suggestions you have regarding topics for future podcast episodes.